So we have some important news in the current efforts to remove suppressors and short-barreled rifles from the NFA nationwide. The Trump DOJ continues to argue that the NFA's restrictions are valid despite the $0 tax change, and this once again is another time that Pam Bondi and the Trump DOJ have actively defended the NFA. But now anti-gun cities have also jumped in support of the Trump DOJ's position. So let's talk about what is happening in this critical case. Now, before I jump into this video, I want to thank the sponsor of this video, which is Brooklyn Bedding. As much as we talk about protecting our rights, you also deserve to protect your sleep, and that's where today's sponsor comes in. So I recently upgraded to a Brooklyn Bedding mattress, and the unboxing alone blew me away. It comes compressed in a single box. It's really easy to open, easy to move. Once you unwrap it, you put it on the bed, and then you just watch the mattress take shape in just minutes. I've been using mine for a bit now, and I genuinely love it. One of the really cool things with Brooklyn Bedding as well is they have a 120-night sleep trial guarantee to make sure it's perfect for you and fits what you want. If you don't love it, you can send it back. No pressure, no hassle. They also back it with a limited lifetime warranty and free shipping right to your door. And so I highly recommend them. And if you're looking for a new bed, you can check them out using brooklynbedding.com, and you can click on the links below and get 30% off your mattress if you use code ARMSCHOLAR. So if you want a mattress that is designed, assembled, and shipped directly out of Arizona, and you want a great mattress, check them out using the link down below. Again, they ship directly to your door, so you get rid of that hassle of having to go pick one up. Again, visit brooklynbedding.com/ARMSCHOLAR, and you can get 30% off your mattress with code ARMSCHOLAR. So as I mentioned in the intro, in this video, we need to talk about what is happening right now in response to the One Big Beautiful Bill and the $0 tax change that was passed through that law. Now, if you've been following the channel for a while, you will know that HR 1 passed, and in that law, we only got a reduction of the NFA tax. It took the NFA tax all the way from $200 to $0, and that's going to start next year. But in response to that, multiple toy organizations and groups have actually filed lawsuits, and they're moving to finish the job. And you have groups like GOA, FRAC, Silencer Shop, Palmetto State Armory, Silencer Co., and then 15 states that have joined together to sue the ATF and try to remove all the remaining NFA restrictions. But now in this case, you have a group of anti-gun states that have filed a brief in support of the Trump DOJ, arguing that the remaining NFA restrictions should stay in place because it would be so dangerous for those cities if the NFA went away. Recently, the DOJ responded to this case, and they continued to argue that the NFA's restrictions are still valid despite the new $0 tax change on these items like SBRs and suppressors. Now, this is not really surprising since Pam Bondi and the Trump DOJ have kind of established a firm track record of defending the NFA and these current restrictions. But their arguments in this case are, like I mentioned, currently being supported also by multiple anti-gun groups and now also multiple anti-gun cities. Now, in this lawsuit filed by Silencer Shop and the other organizations and groups, they argue that since there is no longer a tax on these items like suppressors, SBRs, SBSs, and AOWs, there is no longer a valid constitutional basis to further regulate those items. In summary, what GOA and the other plaintiffs asked for in this challenge is for the court to find that the NFA's remaining restrictions, the registration and transfer requirements, now to these untaxed items, actually goes to beyond Congress's enumerated powers, and there is no longer a valid basis to restrict those items. In this case, the plaintiffs filed a motion for summary judgment to end the case sooner rather than later. Now, what that means is that both sides, actually both the plaintiffs and the Trump DOJ, filed cross motions for summary judgment, and they want to end this dispute sooner rather than later and actually end it before it goes to a full trial. When it comes to the taxing power question that was raised by the plaintiffs, the Trump DOJ argues that even through the One Big Beautiful Bill, which was recently reducing the NFA tax, the statute still remains valid. It still imposes what they claim is a special occupational tax on manufacturers, dealers, and importers. They claim that since the challenge requirements in this case still support the enforcement and collection of the remaining tax on the industry, they believe that the restrictions on the items themselves and on the individuals should still remain in place and is still within Congress's taxing powers. In the brief, they explicitly state that the registration and approval system forms a web of regulation assisting tax enforcement and therefore is still valid. The DOJ then walks out the Commerce Clause as a basis to still uphold the NFA as well. The DOJ argues that the NFA regulates the interstate market of short-barreled rifles and shotguns, suppressors, and AOWs. And the brief notes that the most NFA firearms are manufactured and sold across, state lines. They're sold interstate, through interstate commerce. And they believe that the NFA attaches to all stage of this commerce, the manufacture, distribution, sale by dealers, and purchase by the individual. So this is all to say that Pam Bondi and the Trump DOJ are opposing the NFA challenge with multiple legal arguments. They claim it does still align with Congress's taxing powers, that it is consistent with the Commerce Clause, and also that it does not violate the Second Amendment. But as I mentioned, that position taken by the Trump DOJ in this case is now also being supported by multiple anti-gun cities. The cities filed a motion to the court to allow them to file an amicus brief in support of this case and in support of the Trump DOJ position, and the court just allowed them to file that brief. The amicus brief was filed by cities like Baltimore, Columbus, Ohio, Harris County, Texas, and in it they argue that striking down the NFA would pose a serious risk to public safety and law enforcement within their cities. These local governments claim they have a direct stake in the outcome because the NFA regulates firearms that Congress has labeled as especially dangerous, including SBRs, SBSs, and suppressors. According to the brief, they claim that removing the NFA's registration and licensing frameworks would make it easier for these weapons to be circulated, to be untracked, to be used in criminal misuse, and plague big metropolitan areas in cities like theirs, and that's why they believe the NFA should remain in place. They emphasize that these cities would be at the front lines of any fallout by removing the NFA and dealing with the increased enforcement challenges and potential threats to public safety if this statute is now found invalid. In the brief, they also stress that law enforcement has reliance on the NFA's federal registration system, and they argue that it plays a critical role in officer safety. They argue that local agencies frequently work alongside the ATF and rely on the National Firearms Registration and Transfer Record to identify whether NFA-regulated items and weapons are present during these investigations or potential field work. And if the NFA's registration requirements were essentially struck down, then the cities here argue that the officers would lose access to key intelligence tools, forcing them to operate with less information, and it would pose greater risk to them. Now, beyond the public safety concerns, the brief contends that it offers the court useful legal analysis on issues that the parties did not fully address in their briefs. They claim that they have addressed things like historical tradition, severability, and why the prior Fifth Circuit precedent does not control in this case, and it does not support striking down the NFA entirely. So the anti-gun cities will now get to argue in this case in favor of keeping the NFA's remaining restrictions, despite the new $0 tax change that was passed through the Big Beautiful Bill. Also, it's not a great look for the Trump DOJ that you now have, anti-gun groups like Everytown, Giffords, and all of those that filed an amicus brief in support of their position. And now you have multiple anti-gun cities that have done the same thing and are arguing in favor of the Trump DOJ's position in this two-way case. So there are a lot of moving parts when it comes to this NFA battle right now. Multiple lawsuits have been launched, and unfortunately, the Trump DOJ continues to defend the NFA on multiple grounds. But the plaintiffs in this case continue to push back against the DOJ's current defense of the NFA, and they're pushing back against these anti-gun groups and anti-gun cities that have also jumped in support of keeping the NFA's remaining restrictions in place despite the new $0 tax change. So that's what's currently going on in this critical lawsuit, the NFA challenge that's going on and trying to build off of the $0 tax change. As we get more information, as it develops more, I will let you guys know. If you would like to support the channel, one of the best ways to do that is simply to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, check out one of the two videos here on the screen that the YouTube algorithm thinks that you will find helpful. But as always, thank you so much for all of your support. And never forget, this nation was built by armed scholars, and this nation will be maintained by armed scholars.